Welcome to Bite at a Time Books, where we read you your favorite classics one bite at a time. My name is Bree Carlile, and I love to read and wanted to share my passion with listeners like you. You can sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. You'll also find our new t-shirts in the shop, including podcast shirts and quote shirts from your favorite classic novels. Be sure to follow my show on your favorite podcast platform so you get all the new episodes. We're part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you'd also like to hear what inspired your favorite classic author to write their novels, and what was going on in the world at the time, check out the Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Today we'll be continuing Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Chapter 21, The Heroes. All at once, the drum beat the charge. The attack was a hurricane. On the evening before, in the darkness, the barricade had been approached silently, as by a boa. Now, in broad daylight, in that widening street, surprise was decidedly impossible. Rude force had moreover been unmasked. The cannon had begun the roar. The army hurled itself on the barricade. Fury now became skill. A powerful detachment of infantry of the line, broken at regular intervals by the National Guard and the Municipal Guard on foot, and supported by serried masses which could be heard though not seen, debauched into the street at a run, with drums beating, trumpets braying, bayonets leveled, the sappers at their head and imperturbable under the projectiles, charged straight for the barricade with the weight of a brazen beam against a wall. The wall held firm. The insurgents fired impetuously. The barricade, once scaled, had a mane of lightning flashes. The assault was so furious that for one moment it was inundated with assailants. But it shook off the soldiers as a lion shakes off the dogs. And it was only covered with besiegers, as the cliff is covered with foam, to reappear a moment later, beetling, black, and formidable. The column, forced to retreat, remained massed in the street, unprotected but terrible, and replied to the redoubt with a terrible discharge of musketry. Anyone who had seen fireworks will recall the sheaf formed of interlacing lightnings, which is called a bouquet. Let the reader picture to himself this bouquet, no longer vertical, but horizontal, bearing a bullet, buckshot, or biscayne at the tip of each one of its jets of flame, and picking off dead men one after another from its clusters of lightning. The barricade was underneath it. On both sides, the resolution was equal. The bravery exhibited there was almost barbarous, and was complicated with a sort of heroic ferocity which began by the sacrifice of self. This was the epoch when a National Guardsman fought like a zouave. The troop wished to make an end of it. Insurrection was desirous of fighting. The acceptance of the death agony in the flower of youth and in the flush of health turns intrepidity into frenzy. In this fray, each one underwent the broadening growth of the death hour. The street was strewn with corpses. The barricade had Enjolras at one of its extremities, and Marius at the other. Enjolras, who carried the whole barricade in his head, reserved and sheltered himself. 3 soldiers fell one after the other under his embrasure, without having even seen him. Marius fought unprotected. He made himself a target. He stood with more than half his body above the breastworks. There is no more violent prodigal than the avaricious man who takes the bit in his teeth. There is no man more terrible in action than a dreamer. Marius was formidable and pensive. In battle, he was as in a dream. One would have pronounced him a phantom engaged in firing a gun. The insurgents' cartridges were giving out, but not their sarcasms. In this whirlwind of the sepulchre in which they stood, they laughed. Courfeyrac was bareheaded. "What have you done with your hat?" Bossuet asked him. Courfeyrac replied, "They have finally taken it away from me with cannonballs." Or they uttered haughty comments. "Can anyone understand?" exclaimed Fully bitterly. "Those men." And he cited names, well-known names, even celebrated names, some belonging to the old army, who had promised to join us, and taken an oath to aid us, and who had pledged their honor to it, and who are our generals, and who abandon us. And Combeferre restricted himself to replying with a grave smile. There are people who observe the rules of honor as one observes the stars, from a great distance. The interior of the barricade was so strewn with torn cartridges that one would have said that there had been a snowstorm. The assailants had numbers in their favor. The insurgents had position. They were at the top of a wall, and they thundered point blank upon the soldiers tripping over the dead and wounded and entangled in the escarpment. This barricade, constructed as it was and admirably buttressed, was really one of those situations where a handful of men hold a legion in check. Nevertheless, the attacking column, constantly recruited and enlarged under the shower of bullets, drew inexorably nearer. And now, little by little, step by step, but surely the army closed in around the barricade as the vice grasps the wine press. One assault followed another. The horror of the situation kept increasing. Then there burst forth on that heap of paving stones, in that Rue de la Chevrerie, a battle worthy of a wall of Troy. These haggard, ragged, exhausted men, who had had nothing to eat for 24 hours, who had not slept, who had but a few more rounds to fire, who were fumbling in their pockets which had been emptied of cartridges, nearly all of whom were wounded, with head or arm bandaged with black and blood-stained linen, with holes in their clothes from which the blood trickled, and who were hardly armed with poor guns and notched swords, became Titans. The barricade was 10 times attacked, approached, assailed, scaled, and never captured. In order to form an idea of this struggle, it is necessary to imagine fire set to a throng of terrible courages, and then to gaze at the conflagration. It was not a combat. It was the interior of a furnace. There, mouths breathed the flame. There, countenances were extraordinary. The human form seemed impossible there. The combatants flamed forth there. And it was formidable to behold the going and coming in that red glow of those salamanders of the fray. The successive and simultaneous scenes of this grand slaughter we renounce all attempts at depicting. The epic alone has the right to fill 12,000 verses with a battle. One would have pronounced this that hell of Brahmanism, the most redoubtable of the 17 abysses, which the Veda calls the Forest of Swords. They fought, hand to hand, foot to foot, with pistol shots, with blows of the sword, with their fists at a distance, close at hand, from above, from below, from everywhere, from the roofs of the houses, from the windows of the wine shop, from the cellar windows, whither some had crawled. They were 1 against 60. The facade of Corinth, half demolished, was hideous. The window, tattooed with grape shot, had lost glass and frame, and was nothing now but a shapeless hole, tumultuously blocked with paving stones. Bossuet was killed. Puley was killed. Courfeyrac was killed. Combeferre, transfixed by 3 blows from a bayonet in the breast at the moment when he was lifting up a wounded soldier, had only time to cast a glance to heaven when he expired. Marius, still fighting, was so riddled with wounds, particularly in the head, that his countenance disappeared beneath the blood, and one would have said that his face was covered with a red kerchief. Enjolras alone was not struck. When he had no longer any weapon, he reached out his hands to right and left, and an insurgent thrust some arm or other into his fist. All he had left was the stumps of 4 swords, one more than Francois I at Mrignan. Homer says, Diomedes cuts the throat of Axylus, son of Tithonius, who dwelt in happy Arisba. Euryalus, son of Megistias, exterminates Dressos and Opheltios, Aspius, and that Pedasus, whom the Naiad Iberia bore to the blameless Bucolian. Ulysses overthrows Pedatius of Percosius, Anticolus, Aberlius, Popeptes, Asterlius, Palladimus, Otis of Siln, and Teucer, Araton. Meganthios dies under the blows of Ripilius' pike. Agamemnon, king of the heroes, flings to earth Elados, born in the rocky city which is laved by the sounding river Satnois. In our old poems of exploits, Esplanadian attacks the giant marquis Swantibor with a cobbler's shoulder stick of fire, and the latter defends himself by stoning the hero with towers which he plucks up by the roots. Our ancient mural frescoes show us the 2 dukes of Bretagne in Bourbon, armed, emblazoned, and crested in warlike guise, on horseback and approaching each other, their battle axes in hand, masked with iron, gloved with iron, booted with iron, the one caparisoned in ermine, the other draped in azure, Bretagne with his lion between the 2 horns of his crown, Bourbon, helmeted with a monster fleur-de-lis on his visor. But in order to be superb, it is not necessary to wear, like Yvonne the Ducal Morion, to have in the fist, like Aspladian, a living flame, or like Phyles, father of Polydamas, to have brought back from Ephedra a good suit of mail, a present from the king of men. Euphides. It suffices to give one's life for a conviction or a loyalty. This ingenious little soldier, yesterday a peasant of Beauce or Limousin, who prowls with his clasp knife by his side, around the children's nurses in the Luxembourg garden. This pale young student bent over a piece of anatomy or a book, a blonde youth who shaves his beard with scissors. Take both of them, breathe upon them with the breath of duty, place them face to face in the Carrefour Boucherat, or in the blind alley Planche Mabray, and let the one fight for his flag, and the other for his ideal, and let both of them imagine that they are fighting for their country. The struggle will be colossal, and the shadow which this raw recruit and this sawbones and conflict will produce in that grand epic field where humanity is striving will equal the shadow cast by Megarion, king of Lycia, tiger-filled, crushing in his embrace the immense body of Ajax, equal to the gods. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books today, while we read a bite of one of your favorite classics. Again, my name is Bree Carlile, and I hope you come back tomorrow for the next bite of Les Miserables. Don't forget, you can sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. And while you're there, check out our t-shirt shop. You can look in the show notes or on our website, biteatatimebooks.com, for the rest of the links for our show. We'd love to hear from you on social media. You can find us everywhere at Bite at a Time Books.